project had to be some kind of DeFi project,
Right.
and it happened to be it was all like chicken and hoppers and Krabata, and then but finding that Metamorph Discord with all the actual like 101 artists in there, and then kind of doing our cross chain auction, like it's cool to know, like, just hindsight's 2020. It's just cool to realize that like we made it was the right move. Like
Yeah,
we made the right like connection of like that's going to be a community like ours, and it turned out exactly like that. And now you're having this art culture just boom on AVAX.
yeah. Y'all, you and True Voodoo in Plot Twist, y'all been really good at seeing value and pointing it out, connecting with it, expanding on it, edifying it, and it's pretty. To me, I'm bullish on that in Potluck Labs. You know what I'm saying? I just started streaming live to my thing just because I was thinking like, yo, you're you keep getting these banned off of the Twitter, man. We need to put some attention on to you, man. And
I appreciate it.
yeah,
Yeah, it's funny. When I was sitting down with Miner and Aldo, we were having the conversation. Like, obviously, they were asking me like, how does how does it feel getting banned all the time? Like, like there's when you're trying to build in this space, like Twitter is a massive part of this, and like, getting these followings is a big deal in this space because for whatever reason, it just gives you this verifiableness, or I don't know how to like. It gives you some kind of stature in the space. So like, even I know for me, from like just as a business standpoint, I know my DMs get answered a hell of a lot more when I was sending around DMs at 12K than at 600 people. So that like it does it's shitty in that sense, especially like when we're trying to make this jump to ETH, and like you had I had my original Twitter account, like this might have been very different. A lot more DMs would have been answered and blah blah blah. But the other aspect is that, and this is what they're kind of bringing up, is it's like it's important to build your brand outside of like tags and like all of these little things. Like, and you've seen that early in the NFT days where people literally built their identity around like a single NFT. And then all of a sudden, like that single NFT got sold, and then like they were having like an identity crisis, basically, of like I don't really know what to do anymore. So it has opened me up to the idea of like, this is good.
If Sarge sells his original Phantom Punks PFP, do you think he's gonna have an identity crisis?
It's interesting, eh? Yeah, it's funny, like, but the idea of I guess building a brand outside of tags and PFPs and stuff like that is big, because even like it's nice that I don't have to worry about a following. Like, I know my little Twitter following on right now is I'm at 875. We're closing in on 1,000. Yeah, so as much as it's 875 followers, I know my stature in the space at this point.
Yeah, it's like I know after what is this, the fourth or the fifth time that it's happened this year?
Yeah, this is number 5. I'm on account number 5.
Wow, wow. I'm sure after the first, like the first time and second time, it probably felt different than these last. I mean, I'm sure all of the times is disappointing, but it's it's bogus.
I'm not gonna lie, it gets easier each time, to be honest.
Yeah, you're getting used to it. Yeah.
Yeah, like the first time, I'm not gonna lie, like it was intense. Like I was on a Twitter Spaces, live on a Twitter Spaces, and I think it was Funeral. who was like, "Yo, Tinfoil, um, don't log out of your Twitter.
I was there too.
Like, I think something's going on." And then I kind of, wherever he's checking, I just had to pull the Band-Aid off, logged out, and sure it was gone. That one was a stressful one because it was like that was the first time, obviously, it happening. It's like, oh shit, all my following is gone. I just made the leap into this space full time.
Right.
My business is run online. Like, what is this? Um,
Yeah, it's happened to me, not in the same way. I haven't got my accounts deleted, but like real shadow bans happening where when it's time for me to be promoting an album or promoting a project that I'm putting out, and it's all across the board. My thing is way shaded. It's shaded into the shadows,
yeah,
and I know there's ways for me to get through that. And some days it bothers me more than others because it looks really foolish to have 100,000 K plus followers on Instagram, and I can't even engage with them. I get 100 likes on a picture or
right,
whatever. It's like it just makes my account look bogus,
right.
and like I don't like that. I don't like the way it projects out into the world, and so I think these are experiments though with people's minds that they're doing. They're like doing psychological experiments on people to see their reactions uh, and see what happens. Like even if there is other people who are reporting and it's individuals who are reporting that doesn't matter. They're still taking the data to attempt to uh, understand human psychology in social media more. So,
Yeah, well, I do find it really. I, I find it also interesting because, like, part of me, part of me thinks this social. Like, I want to be on this shit all day, every day, and they're like, this isn't. It's not that healthy for you. So,
right.
like, there's like little things that, like, with them, hating on us all the time. Like, part of it has made me like step back from it a little bit and go like, they don't want me on these platforms. These platforms aren't fucking good for you, anyways. Uh, yeah, maybe I will step back. But then at the same time, it's like it really is the town square now, and you can, like, if you get into the deeper idea of like, all right, is it a private? It's a private company, but like, this is a public town square, and there should be the free exchange of ideas. Um,
Yeah.
and then, like, I mean, you just looking at what just happened over the last couple of days, the whole Alex Jones trial that just happened. Like, that is a massive show trial where, they're just trying to scare anybody that does stuff like what we do into
Right.
thinking that, we're going to get a $50 million fine one day for doing what we do and
Mr.
just
Jones,
asking questions about things.
do you know what perjury is?
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny. It's funny how that worked. Uh, There was some like funny moments in that trial.
Yeah, I feel for him to an extent, but like I don't know the details of what he's specifically on trial for because I'm not diving into that, or I don't have the space in my mind for much Alex Jones stuff. But I do feel for him. I know he was definitely, you know, instigating things and stirring things up to the point that didn't need to be towards the last decade of his man doing his thing. So
Yeah, it's really interesting. The one the very interesting moment is because this is all supposed to be a moment of the Sandy Hook stuff, right? Um, the trial is just supposed to be about the Sandy Hook stuff,
Right.
and for me, what like having watched some like highlights and whatnot, it was It was basically the whoever is suing him, their like final whatever the final closing statements that you make, your legal team. Um, it was like this pure like we need to bury Alex Jones, we need to bury his platform because we can't have people thinking like this. Like, it
Right.
was very much just a whole attack on
Free speech.
free speech. Like, it was clearly like this isn't about what he said during this one time. It was about what is going on today, what has been going on the last couple of years,
Right.
like all of this built up.
I just watched a movie last night on Amazon. I think it was Amazon Prime, and it was the Pizzagate conspiracy movie. It's like a whole movie. It's not a documentary. It's like a satire, and it was made by like Illuminati Films, and it's all about reptilian stuff. And it's it's so interesting how what is put on. It's like that other cartoon we were talking about that was put on Netflix recently. I forget the name of it, but it's conspiracy subjects, and it seems like they're making these to downplay and and make people. It's almost like a gaslighting form of media for anyone who can would possibly think along any of these lines.
Well, this is what it feels like every kind of like conspiracy situation sits in. There's like there is something to the conspiracy. Like there's the eh, but then there's like a bunch of other shit that's thrown into it.
Right.
So then it becomes like so almost outlandish that now you just get turned off the entire thing. And now but then you miss out on that whole little bit of it, like the big shit. Like when you think that ties me into the whole you think about I think the timing of like the whole QAnon thing was very interesting because you have that stuff pop up. Epstein gets arrested, and like the QAnon stuff was talking. It had Epstein stuff in it, and like so obviously there's the truth that you can kind of get into and dive into, but then it just gets so blown up to like
But then John F. Kennedy Jr. was alive and was going to come back and
yeah, like
take the
there's
presidency
so many
again.
people that get into it, and like and it becomes the influencers. It's because that even happened in the QAnon movement. Because I was reading every post that was going on the Chan,
Yeah,
but then watching what then some influencer would like take it and put it on
this
Twitter. It
is
was
what
like,
it's saying.
wait, hold on, I don't think that you're actually like you start to kind of realize like there's bad actors that get put into places
Hmm.
and yeah, some of these ideas get so lost, but that's just it, right? Like there's some real intense information in the whole QAnon stuff, like the three city states. Talking about that whole power triangle.
Yeah, well, that was before QAnon. Like,
Right.
they, so many pieces of information that have a proper context and can actually be helpful to use were weaved into uh, that movement. And well, the way I was thinking about it, like, because there was some people getting really gung ho. I always feel like if it works for you and makes your life better, makes you more compassionate, go ahead with it. But that's the thing. The people didn't seem that relaxed or that uh, creative in their mind when they were just accepting that there was some group out there that was going to take care of everything.
Yeah. So that's the biggest aspect, and that was my biggest problem with the QAnon stuff. and I got caught up in it a little bit, was the whole you trust the plan. Um, there was this idea that it was just sit back and watch. We got this, and that's very much like obviously not the case. But I'm to be honest, I'm intrigued still because I think I want to watch the way things play out over the next few years. Um, because that guy's not going away anytime soon. I think he's gonna be president again come 2024. Uh,
he
and
he he may very well still be president, and it was illegal that Joe Biden actually was sworn in. You
so
never
you know
know.
what's funny? I just watched a thing the other day, and this was a big conspiracy video. It wasn't even on YouTube. It was on like DTube or something like that. But
Me
it
too,
was
old
talking about
school.
yeah. It was talking about that right now we are in a essentially some kind of constitutional government. It's some weird thing with all the emergency orders that were enacted. We're in some like constitutional government where Trump essentially had to resign, and now the idea is just to like let this play out, and then he's going to come right back in as we go through the kind of awakening process.
Dang, and that probably that's when Jesus is going to return too.
Yeah, yeah.
All going to happen at the same time.
Well, so what was that? There was some prophecy guy. Fuck, I can't remember his name. There was some dude who I guess there's a lot of people that think that he keeps calling out all these prophecies. He's got this long hair and shit, but it wasn't the fact that like I didn't think he'd think that Trump was like the Antichrist or anything like that. But there was an aspect to Trump's policies were going to stir up the next bit. And I guess part of that was what's the idea of like building the three churches? Something about building the three churches or like bringing stuff back to Jerusalem. And there was the idea that he had made Jerusalem the capital city again.
Mm.
And that it's like the first time that had happened in like forever. Like, he was basically trying to make like a one Israel again kind of thing.
Right, right. Yeah,
Um,
yeah. Like
it's
there's some Zionist type of connections in that for sure.
yeah, yeah. I think it's also interesting. Like to me, it's like to me, I just look at it as like Trump is basically like it's like mob boss. It's like mob boss mafia stuff versus like occult weirdo stuff. And it's like there's all these like different that kind of goes to our conversation before where it's like these old school families. Then you have these newer families that came into power that have their ideologies. Because like yeah, like I'm thinking of like the whole the Silicon Valley. Does Silicon Valley have the same beliefs as the Rothschild family or the Soros family?
Well, if it's transhumanism, then yes. Like if it's a lot of them are thinking about this downloading to the cloud or uploading to the cloud or metaverse immortality. Uh, I know Klaus Schwab and them, they seem to be in tune with that, the whole biotech uh, movement. So I would say Silicon Valley is linked with that. And then the Rockefellers, they seem very concerned with controlling the narrative and controlling people's bodies
Mm.
with what either what they think is best or what they think is worse, depending on where you think they're coming from. You know what I'm saying? Because some people might think Bill Gates is doing thinks he's doing what's best for people.
Mm.
You
Well, so
know,
this is interesting. Like, and I've heard this. Um, I was watching a thing recently, just a podcast. Some guy named Curtis something, but he big political theorist who is and like data analyst coder who has I guess been on different um, campaign teams and stuff. Like has a really been embedded in the system kind of, but he's got a really interesting. So he thinks that America needs to get into a monarchy again, and
mm,
that there's going to be like a deconstruction of the of dem- well, we went from democracy into oligarchy, and there's going to be a deconstruction into monarchy. That's like the three phases of it, I guess. So he talks
mm,
about like the Constitution was the first ever um, kind of piece of like government paper that essentially made the government all three. It made the government a monarchy in terms of like the system, a top-down system, uh, democracy in terms of being able to vote for it, and then an oligarchy in terms of the power amongst industry is so spread out within your ministries, basically. Um, so
yeah, it, that's interesting.
yeah.
You know, we in the Rasta community, we build on something similar about where when Haile Selassie, the king of Ethiopia, I would have to go on a whole story to break it. I guess I need to provide a little background. So World War II was started in Ethiopia. Winston Churchill, he admits to this fact. It was Mussolini attempting to take over Ethiopia, and uh, Haile Selassie had worked years before this because he knew what they was going to do because they tried to do this in the 1800s too, and his father fought in the war. So Selassie
Now,
knew.
does that play into? Is there a religious background to that? Because I always like to think that, like, I think there's a reason that some of these wars are where they are.
Oh yeah, I mean, the Ark of the Covenant is there, and
Okay,
more than that, that it's like Ethiopia. If you look in the Bible, it's the first. It's mentioned in Genesis chapter
right.
2 in the Bible. The word Ethiopia. It's the only nation that still retains its name, Ethiopia, that was mentioned in Genesis, talking about the Garden of Eden's boundaries and where it was at, and so Ethiopia was a part of that, and stretching from time immemorial, Ethiopia has been a haven for Hebrew, for Muslim, for Christian, where they all live together in harmony for the most part. There are tribal wars and things like that, but I can't get into all the details of everything right now. But basically, His Majesty Selassie worked to be for Ethiopia to be admitted to the League of Nations. The League of Nations was the predecessor of the United Nations. And when the war started in Ethiopia, when Mussolini was trying to shut it down, Selassie, the he fought first of all as a king. Like, when do kings fight on the front line? They
Mhm.
they don't do that in our time, but he did. But the government of Ethiopia, which was a it was there was a constitutional monarchy that he started, which is the point I'm gonna get to. He started a different type of government in Ethiopia than there ever was before, but they voted for him to go to the League of Nations because he was the only one who could plead the cause. He won Man of the Year on Time magazine, like before that. So he had some type of celebrity and he could go plead the cause of Ethiopia. So he went, and this was in 1936. He said, if you strike this match in Ethiopia, tomorrow it's going to burn Europe. And it was appeasement. They was just like, okay, we not finna we finna tell Italy that it's not good, what they doing, but we not gonna do any embargoes or any. They just let them do their thing and try to take over Ethiopia. So like how the United Nations is supposed to prevent those things,
Mm,
it didn't happen. And His Majesty spoke to them at that time, and there is no League of Nations anymore because that's what killed it. His Majesty speaking there saying, y'all ain't living up to the laws of Christ that was supposed to be the League of
mm,
Nations laws. This is what they were supposed to be like. The League of Nations said themselves that neighboring nation states, we supposed to treat like the law of Christ, how you supposed to love your neighbor. Well, we supposed to love our neighboring states
mm,
and find a way to work out through these international conflicts. So basically, uh, again, he spoke at the United Nations as well. After the League of Nations fell apart, he went on to even speak at the United Nations. He's the only king and head of state to speak at both the United Nations and the League of Nations in the capacity that he did. Now, here's the main point. There's no time also in history that a king has voluntarily given up the monarchy
mm,
for a constitution. The the other
mm.
constitutions in came by war.
Yeah.
They came by violence. And so, as Rasta, we see that there was a divine happening of like, if Christ was to come teach I in government, in some of these issues that are most important in our lives right now, so that we don't blow up the earth and have wars amongst each other over frivolous things, how would we have to operate? And so that's why, as Rasta, we look to Haile Selassie and Rastafari because he showed that type of movement, and it what you spoke about just put me on that tangent because there is the constitutional monarchy in Ethiopia already, or there was, and it was removed by the Derg in 1975 when His Majesty disappeared.
Mm. Yeah, I find this all so interesting because, like, it's like long term thinking about how things play out, and like, yeah, because the essentially like that monarch, like they have to be against the system because like we got to devolve the system, like, and the system's not going to give up a monarchy to somebody, so it becomes interesting when you think about who is going to be that type of person. Um, yeah, I I'm so not so. I mean, it's a long term thing, and he's got 17 years, but uh, young Baron Trump. I'm really intrigued to see what happens when he is 35 years old,
Mm,
because first kid in the White House since John F. Kennedy, like first young boy in the White House since John F. Kennedy. Um, I've been seeing articles already from Time and from like people that shit on Donald that basically talk about how Barron has distanced himself from Donald and like almost the Trump name, and then supposed to have an IQ of like 150. Dude is already 6'7" at 16 years old. Like, is going to be just a massive person in general.
mm-hmm.
Uh, it becomes interesting, and then because the family is already embedded, the family has kind of, if you think about Trump's supporters, to Trump supporters, Trump is the anti-system guy. So to Trump supporters, like Barron Trump would come up with the anti-system mindset,
Right.
but ideally like understanding the system. So, but to me, is that too far away? Who could that be before that? because like to me, like does the Kennedy family still play a role? It feels like they've lost most power at this point in time.
I mean,
Um,
yeah, Robert F. Kennedy, he Jr. He done went too far with his statements against Big Pharma and his children's health defense movement. So, uh, and the other ones, they try to distance themselves from him, though. But that goes to the point that we were making the other day that there this concerted effort that we think could be happening inside of these conspiracy theories. There's always going to be variables within family members and within friends or whoever's a part of it. If people can change overnight, you can change over one breath.
well, that's the only thing, right? Is like the fact that like I've just it's like cluing into the idea that like there isn't like no politician just comes up and becomes a politician and oh there they are. It's like you came up through Harvard or Yale, through the programs, through the same group of friends. Like everybody is picked and like you're picked and developed at this point.
Right.
Um, you like the idea of like we're at the point of like Manchurian candidates basically, where it's like these kids of the elites are just being developed through these education systems we've built, uh, and the private systems that they also have. Yeah,
Yeah.
to me it is really interesting. Uh, I
Yeah. And it seemed, for a moment, it seemed like we were getting away from like putting our trust in government and listening to the media, what they had to say, and all of that. And then a huge campaign happened over the last 2 years. And now the same people, the same people who would have possibly, kept breaking away from being just pawns of authoritarianism. They got fear based
mhm.
back into the thing by thinking they needed to rely on the solutions and remedies being presented by the authorities and had to stay up on current events on what the authorities were saying. Like this, I watched the people who had nothing to do with the system and were ready for anarchy and were ready for the people's power just return because they thought they would it was the scientific sophisticated thing, and that if you're not listening to what the system is saying now, that you're you are some type of threat to compassion, threat to families and grandmothers and grandfathers. And it worked. It really worked very well on a great number of the population.
Yeah, well, so this is where I'm intrigued by the theory of this whole like de-evolution, and I guess the understanding that I have of that theory is that like, and it kind of ties back into the QAnon one. I remember one of QAnon's things was like, uh, if people understood like what was actually going on in the world, like 90% of us would be admitted to mental hospitals. It's like the like reality is so fucking intense that like people would just be mind blown. So
Mhm.
then you get into the de-evolution theory is that fact that like, all right, you can't wake them all up, but they've got to go through it. And then the concept is that that's the stage that we're at right now, where okay, everybody did just go. 90% of people did just go. All right, I'll give you all of my trust. What happens if? And I would hate to think that anything goes wrong over the next 5 years, but if for any of the conspiracy guys are right about what may happen over the next 5 years, you're gonna have a lot of people wake up, and I think you're already having it where it's like
The thing
there's
is, though,
already a huge population who are like, why do I need more boosters? I got 4 of these fucking things already, and I'm still catching COVID.
but
Like people are already getting pissed about this.
we was already found correct on so many things that just happened. And if you don't do the independent research, the media, unless we dismantle the branch that is making people not get the information they need and making them get other information, it's like, I'm not even going to say that because that's saying I have an agenda of what information they need, but they're not getting the story. They're not getting every doctor's story. I did an interview with Dr. Andrew Kaufman and asked him if doctors are being criticized or threatened or whatnot, if any of his colleagues are. And he said, for sure, for sure it's been happening. It's like there's a huge group of scientists and physicians who are not being heard. And so, to your point, though, yeah, there to anyone who is a little wondering and curious and has will to go look it up, they're gonna see that there's some faults in the story, but I don't think the information is that readily available because of the fact check and the removals of information.
Yeah, it's. I'm really intrigued to see how it all plays out because I think people are getting. I mean, I don't want to be right, Congo. Like when I think about like the next few, like, I don't want to be right, man. It scares the shit out of me.
Yeah.
Like my whole family got involved in all this. Like I don't want to be right, but yeah, it's like it feels like the fucking hit rate is like at 95% at this point. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then thinking about, is that it does feel like that's the next step. Like if we wanted to wake up the entire fucking population at this point, it would be by force. And what better way by force than they all just signed up with all their trust to government, put this shit in their body, and then all of a sudden, if things go south, well, now they're gonna not like government all that much. But that idea that things go south that's terrifying because again, there's kids that are still getting this stuff on a daily basis now. Like I walked by signs downtown Toronto this weekend that was trying to get kids 5 through 12. So a little pop-up shop.
And it's just people think that there are experts like on something that is a year, you know what I'm saying? It's a year and a half old, or less, depending on whatever they. That's as much research on that. We have millions of years of research on our physical body as it is, and the immunity that can be built. It's just very weird to me that people would so readily jump bandwagon. But I've always been.
The shitty thing is, it's like and it gets me emotional thinking about it. But it's like it's literally taking advantage of humans. Like they took advantage of us because we don't like confrontation. Like we didn't want, because we care so much about everybody else around us. We all just went along with this shit. And like, it's so gross to think about that. Like I'm one of them people. I fucking wore a mask everywhere because I just didn't want to deal with it. I didn't want to deal with the potential of, that a conversation happening and fucking this and that. So even I just went along with that. But those were all little steps, right? Like, yeah, I had my red line of like the vaccine. It was like, okay, I'm not doing that. But my red line wasn't as hard as my dad. Like my dad's red line, not the same as my red line.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like it kills me that they took advantage of like the best in humans to then do this.
Yeah, yeah. They played on people's compassion, and they played on people's fear, and on these emotions. And what's real messed up is there was a whole think tank of people uh, about. I'm not even gonna say the word about
Mhm.
the thing that was about to happen uh, in 2019 of November. They were having a think tank of what they were going to do uh, if something popped off like this, and that's where they probe it all. That's their preparation. Uh, a lot of people think, oh no, they're just being prepared for if it happens. No, they were preparing for what was known was about to occur, and what occurred. Well, I don't know if I don't think all those people in that group knew it was anything was about to occur. I think the people who knew something was about to occur had to get all of those people on the same page to make sure that the Facebooks and the uh, the Boeings and all of the big companies that they understand what the regulations that they were going to have to implement if something like this happened. Get them all on the same page.
Well, this very much
All the
goes back.
media.
Yeah,
Huh?
it goes back to the idea that like a conspiracy, it doesn't need. Not everybody needs to know the whole damn plan.
Right.
You only need a small group of people given the plan, and everybody just doing their job, not asking questions, and
Or
that's all.
being
It's the same thing,
educated, or being educated and indoctrinated
right?
all their lives to
Right.
think that what they're going to do when they're given these directions is the best thing, and never look side of that. Never ever questioning when there's other professionals who have the same credentials or greater credentials than them, and they're bringing them other information, but it's different from what the establishment says. I've seen so many times they just call these people crazy. I've seen people try to discredit a scientist because they were a Christian. This
Mm.
dude, I was talking with someone and I brought up the dude who wrote this, Biology of Belief, Bruce Lipton, and was like, oh yeah, I went and looked him up. He's not a he didn't has nothing to do with epigenetics, and he's a Christian now. I'm like, yo, what does that have to do with
Yeah,
the information?
yeah, yeah. No, it's crazy, and that's the big thing, right? And this goes back to this is like the communist doctrine. Like they had can't it's cancel culture like that. That is part of like the doctrine, where it's like if you speak out outside of like the what the regulatory body wants, we find a way to cancel you, and that could be whether it's some kind of story that makes you seem like a bad person, whether it's all of a sudden
And we could
you're a scientist of faith. How could you do that? Science is supposed to be against faith. Like,
right, and we could call it democracy because democracy just means mob rule.
right,
It doesn't mean higher than that. It just means all, the majority. We think this is what's to be. Now everyone needs to follow what the majority thinks, and that's not even what we set this country to be as. This country was intended to be every man and woman their own government. That if you well, I can't say what it was because there were many people. There were
mhm,
many people forming this country at the inception. I'm talking about in America, uh, but there was a grand experiment happening here, and many people had the idea, even if they didn't perfect it in their ways of relating. that every man and woman was to be their own sovereign. And even when I mentioned women, that was even part of the truth. But but things here's just one connection I give you. There was something called the Iroquois Confederacy. The Iroquois Confederacy is where they say the federal form of government comes from. They learned the federal form of government from the Confederacy that of these tribes in Indian America. And those were very much matriarchal, or very much, it, if not matriarchal, there was a balance between the mother and the father guiding the the clans. And this is to be said because oftentimes we just think that what we're given to us about American history or our government history is just as it is. And we're being indoctrinated to think
Mm.
about our land and our country and our governments in a certain way to get two different to get whatever reactions. I think one is either to get people to obey and be indoctrinated, or two, to just confuse people so that they don't know their roots and have a connection to their ancestry properly.
Yeah, it's all. I don't know where to go with it because, like, when I sit back, I'm a Canadian, so my country is still very much tied to the monarchy, to the crown. It's in the fine print of all of our documents. Like, we don't have a constitution, uh,
Hmm.
and the Bill of Rights, that was very quickly thrown out the window during this whole COVID thing. So it's like clear as day that, like, my government structure isn't as strong for the people as, like, the American government structure. So
It's
I have to
intended
look
to
up.
be. Yeah.
So I have to look up to the American government structure as saying, like, all right, something about that is more for the people,
Hmm.
because the fact that states were able to say, no, fuck those rules, we're gonna just do our thing.
Hmm.
Like, I would have loved that. Like, if I could have ran to a place in Canada that just said, no, fuck these rules,
Right.
like, that would have been amazing, and I would have done so. But because of our government structure, that wasn't able to happen. So there's a part of me that, like, I love America. I love the idea of it. You know, the fact when you look around at third world countries that are going through major issues against their government, a lot of the times when they're protesting their governments, they're flying American flags. To me, that is super telling. Um, but then again, I hate the empire. I hate the fact that there's military bases in 170 different countries, and that most of the shit that goes on is from the like caused by the inside of the empire.
Right. That's the corporation. That's not what the original intention was set on. And because the thing is this, like I said, there's so many different people who had intentions when they started this. Uh, wrote the Constitution, or
Well, yeah, even within those 12 dudes, like, they all had different mindsets. Like a Jefferson mindset, very different than some of the other guys. Like, yeah,
definitely. I'm gonna pull something out on the $2 bill. Oh, my $2 bill ain't in here. It's uh, it's somewhere else. But if you ever look on the back of your $2 bill, you're gonna see the scene of when they were signing the. You could pull it up now too. You could, if you want to. $2 bill, back of the $2 bill, and we could
okay,
look
yeah.
at, and let's see. Let's see if I could show you. So yeah, if we could blow that one up bit, blow the signing Constitution here. We need to get it big enough. Uh, all right, that I guess one is big enough. So look at the door uh, with that on the left. So if you follow the follow exactly down that line that you're at with your mouse, you're on him right there.
Black guy.
Look at the color. Look at the color of that guy.
That's a black guy.
Yeah. But if you look at him, when we say black, he looked like a black Indian guy. He looked
Right.
like the dude on the Redskins.
Right.
Uh, it's like this is the black Indian presence was there at the signing of this document because it's a good chance that the form of this government was handed down from indigenous people, or at least in cooperation at one point. It wasn't all disharmony between uh, the people setting up the government here and the original people that were here. There was disharmony, but it wasn't all disharmony.
Yeah, this is that is super interesting. Yeah, I need to look into more of the American Revolution story. Yeah, it's also intriguing because like part of me goes like if you look at the Klaus Schwab Great Reset thing, we're entering this. He calls it like we're hitting the stage of like the two empires are about to fight, and we're about to see a power vacuum. China and and he doesn't say Russia; it's China and the U.S. And it's after that chaos that the one world government needs to come in and take over, and that's very much like the order out of chaos that the Masonic practices.
I, I want you to pull something else up. Can you type in Ra and Set Egypt and pull up a picture of it? Uh, okay, the third one from the top. Yeah, yeah. If we can make that one.
Oh, how do I just view this? How do I make it bigger?
Oh, it's okay. So basically, what is we talking about? The Great Reset. Yeah, that's good.
Hmm.
So right there on the left, that's Ra.
Yep.
You see the head with the disc, and that's Ra. And that
Yep.
looked like Anubis. See though, properly, if if that's set, that looks like it could be set there holding that staff.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's Anubis. I would have.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's set then. That's set then.
Yeah.
And that's set working with Ra to spear
The snake.
Apophis. Now, Apophis is where the word opposites comes from. I wrote a whole book about this called Rebirth of the Necheru. It's one of the best books on experiencing ourselves as the aspects of the gods of Egypt. But here you have Raset, the great
Mm,
reset.
mm.
Now Set is usually also associated with Apophis. They're not the same deity. They're actually two different aspects. Apophis is like the opposites that we dualities that we fight against
Oh yeah, that's definitely set for sure.
in our life. And then with Set is the part of us, the Set is like the pain body part of us that gets triggered to, okay, here's another one. With Set is all good. You see, Set is the one who cut up Osiris,
Right.
and that brought the chaos from splitting up those pieces and putting them everywhere. But you see him here in and he looks like he's in a benevolent posture
Yeah.
because when we're talking about the reset, when we're talking about Ra and Set, there's two sides to it. The Great Reset can be a detrimental thing, or it can be a blessing thing. But everything turns out for blessing in the in the long run. So these are just some things I think about when I hear the word the Great Reset. I hear Ray because you know another way to say Amun Ra is Amun Ray. It's another pronunciation. The vowels were uh, there were seven vowels in Egypt, and they could all be interplaced after the consonant. So Ra could be Ra, Ri, Re, Ru, Ro, Ru.
Yeah, the Egyptian god of war, chaos, and storms.
Chaos.
Brother.
It says chaos. So we're talking about order and chaos here.
Yeah.
But you see him
Brother
there. You
brother
see,
of Osiris, Isis, and Horus the Elder. Uncle to Horus the Younger. I don't know who Horus is. Oh, that's so interesting. So then, so Ra, are Ra and Horus the same god, basically?
no, but Ra Herukti, Ra Herukti or Herukuti is the form of Ra as Heru, and they are uh, you if you the one we were looking at prior when you first pulled up the glyph sort of looked like Ra Herukti or a form of Ra and Heru as one. So that what this image that you have there highlighted is very significant. That is the image of Sema Tawid or Egyptian yoga. You have Heru or Horus on one side of the lungs in the trachea, and you have Set on the other. And they're coming into union again, coming into harmony and balance. Set was an enemy for a time, right? When he
Yeah.
killed Horus's father. But now they're working together after that. And that is the atonement. That is the at one-ment, the return to wholeness when higher self and lower self. You can even find an image with Set's head coming out of the back of Heru's head, and it's the two heads right there, and it's coming out of the medulla oblongata, the reptilian, right near
Mhm.
the reptilian part of the brain as well.
Oh, this stuff's so interesting. I find this like Egypt to me is just this stuff is so fucking amusing. Because like,
Yeah.
what were these like? Who gave birth to these gods? Like, what is that story for them? I guess it's like Osiris's.
Well, Ra, there's many different cosmology stories, and Ra at times is said to, or Atum Re is said to give birth to him. Tahuti, Thoth is said to give birth to the gods. Now, if you read in my book where uh, that I wrote, I don't have it sitting here. I don't think, but we look at all of these as aspects of our own being, and it's a constant process that happened then. It'll keep happening, and it's happening now. The Necheru isn't a thing that the gods of Egypt isn't a thing where oh, what happened 5 billion years ago? How did they do that? No, it's happening right now. You look at yourself, you look at how the mind works, how awareness creates what it focuses on, and in how relationships, what happens in our own relationships. And if you delve into the stories of these scriptures, we end up seeing all of these things happening in our own life, in our own, it becomes real to us if we're able to embed the wisdom from these scriptures and these glyphs into our astral body through reading and through dreams and taking time contemplating on it. Then what happens is the mysteries of them reveal themselves as happening now. And then if there was a grand happening uh, in ancient times, the first time when God first created the gods or creation, it's happening now too, because as above so below, as then it is now, as within so it is without. uh, so that's how we look at it. We approached in a cheru here as ourself, the gods as ourself, and then we're able to understand, have a greater glimpse into what may have occurred because it's still occurring.
Yeah, well, even this, I'm just kind of going through some shit here. Like, I find this even interesting. Like, it's weird that so you have like that whole set of Egyptian gods that are all animal depictions,
Yeah.
but then the set of gods before that is Osiris and Isis, which have like a human look to them,
Hmm.
and then now I'm reading that Geb is supposed to be the father of Osiris, and he is like a
Earth.
human looking god, and he's
Hmm.
supposed to be the god of Earth. Yeah,
Yeah, that all of these symbols are, they have greater greater meaning than and here's the other thing. When you look at the symbols, do they like stir up your emotion, and do they stir up your curiosity?
like the curiosity, big time for sure.
They stir up your imagination.
Yeah,
So that's what that was the purpose is. One, these symbols were to have meanings that we all could connect and talk about, but they were also to have meanings that were beyond words, and to be an experience. And we don't approach our language and our art like that any longer, that it's an experience you are having with the divine. And through a little background in getting some information, like the Medu Necher is one good. Oh, that's Bess. He's one of my favorites. Bess. He's the one who made me write the book I wrote.
dude, he's an ugly little character. Yeah, big old titties on him and everything.
He thinks that's funny that you said that. That's that. Here you go, right here. To remember, I was showing you him the
Oh,
other
yeah, yeah,
day.
yeah. Okay, yeah. He reminds me. He looks like a little lemur. I don't know. That's cool.
Did you say he reminds you of Lemuria?
Well, I was. Should I
Uh
have said that? What is Lemuria?
Lemuria is the other land uh, before Atlantis. I'm looking to see. Oh, you. I mean, you got the internet there. Like I got all my books here, so I'm so used
Yeah.
to grabbing the books. But you got internet. You could type in Lemuria, or and yeah, there you go. Yeah, go to that one where it's connected to Africa on the right. That one is important there.
Mm.
So it's connected to India, it's connected to Africa, and it's connected to Australia. And then Australia in the Pacific was connected to the Americas, and that was Lemuria. Lemuria was an ancient land uh, in the that stretched all the way to the Pacific from the east coast of Africa and the southernmost part of India. It's wild, ain't it?
It makes it. You know what? Honestly, this shit kind of makes sense to me because it just. I don't know. It feels like when you look at like Earth landmass and all that shit, like it doesn't make sense. Like there's too much water. Like where are these like why this is like little pieces of land just sitting? So like, it does kind of make sense to me. Like there was way more land at one point, and like land just kind of goes away as water becomes a bigger thing. And
In air, you see, air was more water back in the day as well. The air was more water. It's still water. Our air is still water, but we the reason why it was even easier to levitate is because people were able to swim through the air because of the quality of the air. The air was so dense with the H2O and other minerals. so we were less dense than the air, or we could, the same way you shift your body weight, you was people were able to shift their body weight to, you know how when you're in water and you can float, but then if you shift your body weight you don't float.
hmm,
And the same, that's how it was. Boy, we getting into some deep
yeah,
yogi secrets now, man.
yeah, I like this. Yeah, I'm just reading here that so this one guy thinks that landmass was destroyed approximately 10,000 BC.
Church word, yeah, he wrote the book that I got off of here somewhere. I got a few books on Lemuria, but the one by him, by the
Oh, and that's interesting. Renowned occultist and mystic who
ha,
formed the Theosophical Society claimed to have acquired the knowledge on Lemuria through an ancient Tibetan text.
Blavatsky.
Huh. So are they learning this in the as you rise up the ranks? Ah, see, this is what I mean. Like this stuff is so intriguing to me. Like, what kind of history is being taught throughout the the lodges? Did you get your 33 third degree and move up the ranks? Dude, I'll
Well,
never forget as a
not
kid going
not
to
this
Shriners
regime.
circuses and just
Not
thinking that
this.
was the coolest thing in the world. And those guys, funny old guys with the little weird hats on top of them,
Yeah, yeah.
not having any idea that these are all like well established men.
Well, see, yeah, I think those. I think that's a cool practice. You know, I think a lot of those people do that in benevolence. They attempt to do what they think is helping,
Yeah.
but once again, it's promoting Rockefeller medicine. Now, as far as the are these things taught in lodges? Uh, rarely not.
Right.
Uh, in Rosicrucian, you will get some of this, but in a Masonic lodge, it is very rare. Like 1% of all lodges. I can't say I've been to all lodges, but I traveled myself for some time, and I have a lot of friends. When I say for some time, it's because the lodge I was a part of is no longer operating, and I'm thankful for that. Like what I my journey into it was for a time being, and most people don't get a chance to say that. Uh, and I'm not a person who's down with organizations and institutions. It's just not my thing. But I'm down with friends and family, and there was friends and family in it. And so I built with them and had wonderful initiatic experiences.
Mhm.
And I made it the most for myself. I was the chaplain of my lodge, and there was no chaplains ever in the lodge before. And it's just because of who I am. They was like, we need to have this dude in a role
Yeah.
at the lodge, and I became that, and I shared in the capacity that I could. And the when the things fall apart, as things do, uh, I made joy with my departure, and in and honorably departed. So through my own experiences and through okay, so in the lodge that I was in, we would talk about
Yeah.
we would talk about stuff like this, but that's because we were in it. We we were in the lodge, and that's all it's about. It depends on who is there, and then it when you talk about it, once again, there's going to be a person and another person, and you're going to have to decide, okay, do I believe this information? How what type of capacity do I esteem and hold this information that I'm getting? Because it's all going to be myths. It's all myths and legends.
Mm.
That's why the Masonic thing is based on like just sort of a made up myth, sort of from the Bible, sort of on other stuff, because there to me you can learn more about masonry by seeing how, the broad look at that myth
Mm.
and learning that that's what it's about, being able to use your rhetoric to spin a story that works for you.
Right.
And masonry worked for people, it worked for people, but it also doesn't work in the ways that people are using it. When it's used in ways um, to harm at all, then it's not working, because there's no good that comes from harm, and that's not work. Um, when it's used for when a person brings sincerity and authenticity to whatever they do, Christianity, Masonry, Islam, atheism, they're going to be a dope person because they're sincere and they're authentic. They're going to be a dope person. That's how I look at it.
Yeah. So I guess like in the end, it's just like everybody literally has their beliefs and they're playing out their beliefs, just whether or not. I gotta know like what what gets Bill Gates through his shit that he's just like can sleep at night. You know what I mean? Like
Does
there's
he?
some of these players that are just nasty that you're like, what is getting you? How can you sleep every single night?
He thinks he genuinely thinks he's doing what's best. All you have to do is constantly listen, re-indoctrinate yourself into thinking what you're doing is best. I don't think that he's out here. I'm gonna kill all these people. I'm
Right.
gonna. I think he's just like, there's a problem. We need to make sure that we can preserve this way of life. We need to. It's just fear. It's
Yeah.
fear
Yeah.
and trauma, and so he probably don't sleep that good. He don't look like he get that good of a rest at night either. So
Yeah. No, you're not wrong. Oh, that's so interesting. Yeah, because even like I think about a little quote that I'd just from a recent podcast, because I've always had the concept like communism. There's very much of like the removal of God because you have to have state as the highest power. Because why would I listen to state if I had a higher power than that? Um, so communism, you got to remove the faith in God first. And then I was listening to a podcast recently that was Tim Dillon, who was just a hilarious comedian, and he was talking about uh, working with a bunch of Russians or something that had came over, were visiting, and he just makes a joke about, you know, like Russians having beautiful blue eyes, but when like being completely soulless, like looking soulless, and it and then he makes the joke of like, that's what 100 years of atheism does to you, like as a nation. But it was like, it's a joke, but like there's a real hit to it, because like when I think about like this feeling like division of society and this fall of society lately, feels like you could track that chart identically to like the rise in atheism. And then it's like, well, for me, when I think about like atheism, like you basically, I mean, it's like a belief in nothing. So like, I guess it's like not. I guess it's not. It's not a belief that you're God. It's just a belief in nothing. Because it's like,
Yeah.
I just don't get how these people like that feel like they're trying to play God. Like, don't have some like weird feelings inside. You know what I mean?
Yeah. See that to try and play God, that and there's a difference between playing God and being God.
Mm,
I experience, because I experience God as omnipresent. What can I point to that isn't God? Can I point here and say this isn't God? If I did, that would be me denying the omnipresence of God. It, and also, if I look at this and say, well, this is just a little piece of God. Well, in a hologram, if you take out the little piece and you look at the piece, you can find the whole.
yeah.
The whole, the information for the whole is in that little fractalized part of the hologram. And so Christ was communicating this when he was saying, I and my Father are one. This is the idea of oneness with God, oneness as God, oneness through God. And it's a contemplation, it's a contemplative life. It's not a demand, a firm thing. I am God. And just, it's not like that. It's more so, I honor God so much in everything, as everything, that I must honor it with me, that it's the most humble thing to do, to honor God as myself, because that would be self-depreciating, that would be God depreciating, to not honor God as myself, and to not honor God as you.
Right.
But that means, what is our concept of God then? um is it just like this one person that's separate from everything, who rules from somewhere else? Or is God what permeates every single thing, that allows every single thing to be, and very breath right now?
Yeah. Okay. So you're right. You're right. That's interesting.
But those people don't think about it in that way, because this way leads to compassion. This way leads to me looking at you and wanting the best for you, without wanting to interfere with you and with all of my relations. This way looks to all of the relations of wanting to support, edify, and encourage that same godness, to praise God
Right.
in you, to praise God in our cat, to praise God in our bunny, in the tree, and to praise God in all things. But the other way looks to make a concept of, I am the enjoyer. I want to enjoy it all. So I am going to do whatever I can to enjoy, and whatever I fear, I'm gonna fight against that. That's not godly. That's not godly at all. Like when we say these people are thinking that they're gods, there must be gods that have fear. You know what I'm saying? And that's not a god at all, because God is pure love. That's what God is pure love. So when we know they're not what they're saying they are, they can never be that. When we know God as love, we know that any of these malefactors, these planners of harbingers of evil, they they're really just traumatized and in fear. Uh,
But
and this,
I guess to me, it's almost more so of like I guess maybe God isn't the right word. Maybe it's like the Thanos mindset,
mm-hmm,
where it's like, okay, maybe you're not God, but you have the power of a god. Where it's
mm-hmm,
like, okay, I'm gonna decide that there's too many people on the planet for the betterment of the people.
right.
We need to get rid of a bunch of people, and like,
And we watch shows where they make these decisions all the time, like in these movies, and they're like, will you do this to save all these people? Will you do
well,
you
so this
know?
is where like the MCU, like the Marvel universe, like it does get so fucking in depth because like you're even at the point where I'm watching videos where they're talking about Thanos making that decision of snapping to kill everybody was only because he had the knowledge that the Eternals, which are the super godly beings, that one Eternal, I guess, was like he was in Earth and like farming Earth. So that's why Thanos needed to snap off half the population so that that Eternal could never reawake, because the Eternal feeds off of the energy of life force. So because the Earth was reaching a point of a population that was feeding this thing, by Thanos making the decision to cut the population in half was for the betterment of the Earth, basically. And
Mhm.
it's like it's a really deep concept when you get
And
into like Thanos is essentially some kind of god or has godly power, but then is still looking at other gods being like these Eternals.
for sure. And it also brings us to think about, so is what is God? Is godly power the ability to manifest anything out of thin air immediately, or disappear anything out of thin air immediately? And is it, or is God our ability to love and forgive, and are those two things connected? Like, is our do we have powers?
Mm.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm almost thinking of like the power of creation and destruction, because I guess there's like in the biblical terms, like humans are way better than animals, right? Like we have domain over animals for a reason. And like when I think about what gives us dominion over animals, just in like a practical terms, it's the idea that like maybe it's the consciousness that like lets us like create something and destroy something. Like a dog is never going to think to build even a doghouse for itself, or like take the ability to destroy a doghouse, or like
Yeah, the powers. So so creative the creative mind is one of the powers of God. But as the more we create, we're because I can creates karma, and karma, things come back around. And when they come back around, the act actions from these things are the feedback, the biofeedback from our creations. And if we're creating things that are harmful, there's gonna be feedback. We need to start learning. You see, after having creative mind, then comes learning how to relate to what we've created
Right.
in all of these relationships and all whatever we've put out there. And that is the part that if you even look in the Marvel universe, like see Thanos connections with his family and see some of those inner workings of those relationships and how those things influence the actual outcomes of what's happening. It's how people are to each other that ends up influencing what happens in the long run, even more than the power. It's how people, the relationships people have.
Right. Well, Congo, as always, I love the conversation. I got to bounce for a
Yeah,
little potluck team meeting here in a couple minutes, but
give
as always,
give the family my regards.
will do. Yeah, dude, love this.
Thank you, man. Love you, Brethren.
All right, brother. We'll talk to you later.